war in Bosnia and Herzegovina, the country continues to struggle to unify, heal, and rebuild against the backdrop of buildings still pockmarked by bullet holes. In the face of overwhelming pain and social divisions that continue to exist today, some women in Bosnia and Herzegovina are taking ownership and shouldering the country's burdens in order to carry a torch of humanity, to shed light and pour their love, their faith, and their hope into Bosnia's communities. Despite their courage and dedication to build peace in Bosnia and Herzegovina and to advocate for structural changes, for gender equality, and for the protection of women and children from violence, they are often underrepresented or entirely excluded from official negotiations at the national and international level. Please join the Turkish Student Association in welcoming our guest, Dr. Spahic-Siljak, visiting lecturer in Women's Studies and Islamic Studies and Women's Studies in Religion Program Research Associate at the Harvard Divinity School, to present her talk entitled Women Do Peace and Men Negotiate It, Bosnian Experience in Peacebuilding. Zilka Spahic-Siljak is a Deputy Director of the Center for Interdisciplinary Postgraduate Studies at the University of Sarajevo. She holds a master's degree in Human Rights and Democracy, jointly confirmed by the University of Bologna and the University of Sarajevo, and a PhD in Gender Studies from the University of Novi Sad. With over a decade's experience in higher education and non-governmental sectors in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Siljac's research interests reflect her dedication to the study of human rights, religion, politics, education, gender, and peace building. She has previously taught at the Arizona State University and the universities of Pittsburgh, Oslo, Copenhagen, Vienna, Belgrade, and the University of Novi Sad. Her major research projects are published in several important studies, such as Women, Religion, and Politics, Women, Believers, and Citizens, and the book Three Monotheistic Voices, Introduction to Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. While at the Women's Studies and Religion program at Harvard, she will complete a book manuscript on the women's role in peace building in Bosnia and Herzegovina. This book will draw upon a life story interviews with women peacemakers from the country in order to explore the socio-political and cultural challenges these women face and to highlight the successes that they have achieved. Let us give a warm welcome to our guest lecturer today.
So I'll sit here closer to you to be heard and use microphone. So I was going to give a talk about women's peace building initiatives in Bosnia and Herzegovina during the war and the post-war period. And as Alma said, I've been doing that research currently and trying to finish the book. And for that research, I interviewed 12 women in Bosnia, and these women are coming from all religious, ethnic, and non-religious backgrounds. These women were recognized by their local communities, and the baseline studies conducted in 15 cities as peacemakers and as somebody who invested so much in the last 20 years on building peace. So basically the main criteria were, the recognition by their local communities, the scope of work they have done, and also ethnic, religious, and geographic distribution. So the reason why I decided to do this kind of research, you always discuss your motivation. So, and there are several reasons for that. I was involved in so many activities also during the war and after the war, and peace building and human rights. During the war, as a young graduate from the Islamic Studies in Sarajevo, I was immersed in the war and had to deal with war trauma, rape, and all of atrocities committed during the war, and had to find answers not only for myself, but also for many women, children, and men who suffered and who were coming at that time in Zenica, which is central Bosnia. There are many refugees from eastern Bosnia, Srebrenica, Zvornik, Vlasenica, Bratunac, and also from western Bosnia, Bosanski Petrovac, Prijedor, Kozarac, and other cities were coming. And at that time, in the city of 50,000 inhabitants, we had 350,000 refugees. And the main concern were how to feed all of these people because we have had enough, especially after the closing the main roads with Herzegovina when Croats and Bosnians entered the conflict. So at that time, I can say that many of women started their peace-building activities, and as many theories show that peace does starts basically at the very moment of conflict. So it doesn't start, after the war when something is finished, but at the very moment when conflict erupts, so peace also starts. And many women in Bosnian cities, in Zenica, Sarajevo, Mostar, Banja Luka, Bosansko Grahovo, Livno, and many other cities, decided to be great humanists and also to stand for their neighbors and friends, for their lives, and to protect them and to provide at least small comfort during the war, and then to save some of their lives. And there are really incredible stories from these cities, how people survived thanks to their neighbors. And these women, and after the war, they continued with their activities and established NGOs, which is the best way to systematically approach to some issues there and to get funding, because many foreign donors at that time, including Americans, Europeans, Asians, were there and provided support. So these women were able to help many refugees, returnees, and also the most vulnerable groups of women and children who came from the war camps and who experienced the worst types of violence there. So these women have never thought in their lives that they were going to do this kind of work. They were bank officers, teachers, businesswomen, architects, different kind of occupations they had, and they were thinking they're going to have peaceful life with their families, doing their jobs, and that's it. And then the war was a turning point in their lives, and when they experienced how it is explained in many theories like epiphanies, something that makes you to stand for the humanity of other human beings, to show the sacredness of human life, and to remind the rest of us what does it mean that human life is really sacred. Why thousands of other women and men didn't do that? Because we know from the Second World War and other wars that most people remain silent. Why? Because they are afraid of. They are so scared. Sometimes they are not able to speak up for themselves, and not to mention for other people, but also many people, calculate. And they, when they make these moral decisions, they think, okay, I need to think about my life, the life of my family, and then what's going to happen with my neighbors. Some of these women really didn't think about that. So in these moments, when they had these epiphanies, they stood for the lives of their friends and their neighbors, and simply, haven't had explanation after that why they did it. I really was persistent, keep asking, why you at that very moment? Because you haven't been trained as a peacemaker, as somebody who will do that. And how it has happened, they don't have explanation. They said that some inner voice and something that they believe truly, and that for many of them it is religion, but also for many of them it is just deep sense of humanity. Because you have to keep in mind that most of these women and most of the people in that region lived in the socialist Yugoslavia, where we had brotherhood, unity, and equality, and many people genuinely believed in that, and some still believe in it today in that region. So they were motivated by that deep sense of humanity, equality, and then a possibility to live together and to stand for other human beings. When I approached to them with questions to do life story interviews, for most of them, this kind of methodology is unknown, it's quite new, and they didn't feel quite comfortable when you come and then say, okay, I would like you to tell me your life story. And then you say, you don't have any question? I say, no, I don't have any questions, I would like you to tell me your life story. Oh my God, where to start, what I'm gonna say, what is important, so what do you expect me? I don't expect anything, I just wanna hear your life story. And then it was how many women in that region, Mirza and Alma and Azra, will know that, they usually say, my dear, what I'm going to tell you, and then in Bosnian language, I don't have story. And then start revealing her story 70, 100, and sometimes 150 pages, which means that they have stories. Each of us basically has stories, so but it depends basically how we tell it and what is the context, are we comfortable to do this, and etc. So the advantages and disadvantages of that approach, to say that the advantage at one point was that I was familiar with most of these women. I have known their work for a long time, and I've been involved in so many activities together with some of them. And it was easier for them to say, okay, she will understand it better. She's not one of the many foreigners who are coming to do their PhDs and etc. And they were very thankful that for the first time somebody from Bosnia decided to do this kind of research. And they said, okay, so we will tell you our story. When they finished the story, we had to meet for a second or third or fourth time, to discuss some other details, because after that I had some questions and clarifications for the interview. Each of these stories are really incredible and heroic stories of deep faith and humanity, and that it's possible to stay human in the darkness of the war, to stay human when everything is upside down, when nothing has sense, basically, when you don't see any exit, when dark is around you, but they found basically birth, trying to save somebody's life, and at least to provide small comfort at that very moment for somebody, and it was very important for them. So why these women are not visible, you mentioned in the introduction. They have been working for the last 20 years in Bosnia and Herzegovina. I have to say, is there any Herzegovinians here? Because they don't like if they skip. Yeah, Azra is half. She spent so much time in Moscow. So why these kind of efforts are still not visible there? So how it is possible that somebody is working so much in these local communities and people doesn't know? Only 22% of respondents on the field survey and web survey recognize these women, which means it is not too much. 22% after 20 years. Especially younger generations, our daughters' generations, your generations who are at the university, do not know that their next door neighbor might be a peacemaker and did these incredible heroic things, because they today mostly live in ethnically homogenized communities divided. They go to different schools, they have different courses, and mostly they do not interact except in some bigger urban areas. So our generations, I'm an old lady, raised in the socialism, we have that experience of multicultural life. We haven't been taught at the university how to live multiculturalism, how to be a good neighbor. So we live that. These new generations do not have that experience except in bigger centers. So that's why it is important to leave the message that somebody did this and somebody dedicated his or her life to peace. And also a Bosnian and Herzegovinian political and social context is very complex and complicated. I don't know how much you're familiar with Bosnia. Is there any need to explain further, or we can do it with questions later? It's very complex, and today in Bosnia, which is quite an impoverished country with over 40% of unemployed people, where ethno-nationalism is idol. So basically people have idols. Their ethnicity and nation is idol. So they replace God by these idols. And where ethno-nationalism basically govern everything in the social and political life, and where the most profitable job is to be a politician today, because it is the well-paid job. You can have 3,000–4,000 euros if you are a politician, and why not run for the election? Instead, you can be a teacher and have 300–400 euros, or do some other job. So in that kind of a setting, you know, imagine somebody is doing this work and trying to improve the life and conditions for many who are really in terrible psychological and material conditions, because most people in Bosnia and Herzegovina are traumatized. It doesn't matter whether they lost somebody or not. All of them who spent the war there are traumatized, because, you know, for 4 years just, you know, listening shells and bombs and all of these stories, and then refugees, and then media, crazy propaganda, you know, it affected most of us. So we really need, you know, collective healing, but we don't have time for that. So also these women haven't had time for that, and haven't had time to tell their stories, because all of them emphasize the importance of doing work. So visibility comes later. But who is concerned mostly with visibility? Unfortunately, men. And this group today, we also have men. Thank you for coming. but most of them reflected to that, and they said basically how men really knows every tiny detail, what they accomplish, to present, to praise, to simply get awards for that, and being recognized and respected in the community. But women don't have time for that. They do one job and say, okay, move on. We have something else to do. But they also understood, if you are not visible, if you do not present your story, if you are not in media, you don't exist. And this baseline study basically showed that. People will forget about you. So they need to work on their visibility, because it is a good way to channel the message. So if you are just work, nobody's aware what you are doing there. So through one of the stories I prepared for today, I'll only read that story, and I will tell you a little bit about her background. You will see basically gender relations and how they perceive what women and men have done during the war. So in my book I have 12 stories. As I said, women of all ethnic and religious backgrounds, but also non-religious backgrounds. And this one for today is coming from Bosansko Grahovo, which is, for those of us from that country, is one of the most remote place in the country. When you say Bosansko Grahovo and Bosnia, people usually, think that even God forgot about that place, which is, blasphemous. But really, that city is a ghost city, especially after the war. And imagine, go there and work. Some of us went there for a couple of days, do some work, and then, go back to Sarajevo or some other cities and say, oh my God, how it is possible to stay there, and then you cannot breathe. So Bosansko Grahovo was populated by majority of Serb Orthodox population before the war, 95%. When the war started, Croats Catholics came there and they expelled whole population. But they didn't only expel them, they destroyed city completely. All vital functions of the city were destroyed. It was really a ghost city. And after the war, returnees, like in many other cities, started to come there. But of course, official politics of the Croatian Catholics at that time was not to allow people to return, like in many other cities with Bosnian Muslims and others. And this lady, her name is Danka. She's a Catholic woman. She was raised as a Catholic. And she was very young at that time, in her early 20s. She came back from Germany, where she was with her family, because most of her family lived there. And she came back to Bosnia to help her people. And her family was crazy about that. You have comfort, you have everything, you have an opportunity for education. Your family is there, so why are you going there? And she simply felt, basically, that she had to be there with her people. And she graduated from the police academy. And her first appointment was in that city, Bosansko Grahovo. And when her family heard about it, imagine yourself in that position. They said, oh my God, at that time, there were only few female police officers. It was not common to have women in police. They said, it's unacceptable for you to go there to work. And then she said, it's okay, I'm going there. And she went there, and they started to convince her, to persuade her to come back. And she said, no, I want to stay. And then, with one of her colleagues there, she started helping refugees. She said, when I've seen these elderly people who were coming to their pre-war city to see the remnants of their homes who were burned and destroyed completely, I was touched and moved, and I had to help. And then she had troubles with her superiors without telling her why are you helping them, because they had, as she explained at the time, kind of social discipline, not even to talk to these people, to ignore them, to make hardships to them, and to send the message that they are not welcome there. So they will not return to that city. But she said, I couldn't. I simply was moved with their destinies, and I couldn't tell these men and women that they could go to their village if they are mine. If I knew that there were mines there, they could have been killed. And then after years and years, she decided to quit her job in the police. At that time, working in state institutions with regular job, permanent job, and good salary was heaven. And everybody who decided to do that was crazy. To leave a secure job, something with a good salary, good incomes, and go into unknown was not reasonable at all for her family, for her colleagues, friends, anybody. But she said, I think I can do something for these people. And she did it. She literally visited every household in that region. And there are villages that are distant from the city over 70 kilometers. I don't know in miles how it is. 70.
45, 50 miles.
Yeah. So very, very distant villages in mountains without electricity, water, infrastructure, anything. And she started going to these villages and helping people. And she said, you know, I took my car and brought beddings and, you know, towels and the first things they would need when they come back, and they appreciate it. But her superiors told her, you know, that she might be killed if she would continue with these activities. She said it doesn't matter. And her colleague, who later became her husband, also was trying to convince her to stop, because he knew that basically people on the power in that city and in that canton, in that province, were people who were mostly involved in war crimes, war criminals, and who could have done that. But she didn't listen. And she said, I had to go there because I knew that they don't have roof, that they don't have anything. They had to go to hospitals. They had to provide medicines. And then once she said, you know, when I started coming here, they were reluctant to talk to me. And then they made a coffee and started talking, and then crying and telling their stories. And then they would ask, oh, could you bring some medicines to us? And then she said, yes, of course, and continue with that. So her entire life was basically dedicated to refugees, and she's known there as a mother of refugees. Although she is the youngest, she's 38 now. She was very young, in her early 20s at that time. Imagine, I mean, young boys and girls today, what kind of power she had at that time, and what kind of faith. And her motivation was out of deep sense of humanity that is closely related to her religion. She said, I was raised in that manner. I was taught in my family and in my church. But none of her family members did the same. They also raised with the same values. But they were against her work. And they were criticized her. Why are you helping these Serbs? Because they don't deserve to be supported. And then, over time, she was able to lure them over it, and then to get support, and they started to bringing and collecting stuff for these refugees, etc. So Danka glorified the power of Bosnian women. When she spoke about Bosnian women, she worked with Orthodox Christians, Muslims, and Catholics. And I would like to read part of her story that is related to that, so to get a sense, basically, how she perceived the role of men and women in post-war period. So working with Bosnian women in Bosansko Grahovo, she discovered how much they are special persons, able to accomplish so much in unbearable situations, and always ready to do more if they get a little support and credits. End quote. Very few women can bear that burden, that sadness, that pain, that anguish in the way our women bear. And in spite of all these troubles, she is smiling and cheerful. She talks to you again, she complains to you, and in 5 minutes she's laughing with you, singing, and she's ready to make miracles happen if you just give her a little push. Danka narrated about special kind of characters of these women, and she met many in Europe when she lived in Germany, and claimed that they are not comparable with Bosnian women regardless of their nationality. She says, the family comes first. The power to raise, to advance, to make something, not to be at the bottom, to help your neighbors, to come running, to give, and I don't know, to fight. It's not like this everywhere. It is specific for our Bosnians. Danka glorified Bosnian women who had so much courage to endure pain, to sacrifice themselves for their families, to be the rock for their families during the war, to show understanding for their husbands who came from the war fronts, and help them to heal their traumas and wounds, and they have never had time to say what they need and how they feel. Nobody asked them before Danka came to their villages to talk to them and ask them how they live, how they feel, and what kind of support they need. A man was center of everything, and his needs and wishes were on the first place. When women face hardships, men play a role of offending and bereaved children, and doesn't know how to pull himself together. And she says, women feel pity for him, but she keeps struggling. She has strength and energy to keep going on, to rebuild everything, to bring children on the right path, and man is behind. Somehow, he is not even up to her knees. With sadness in her voice, she said that during their struggle to survive, there was male ego, which means it was hard for them to go to Red Cross or Muhammad Muslim charity organization. It was hard to ask for help with male. Women did all the work, provided logistics, taking care about children and the family needs. It was on the men as heads of families to make decisions about return, but only decisions. Everything else was on women. Packing, finding transportation, changing the school for children, making friendships, etc. Danka was trying to explain why men lack interest in providing for family after the war, and explained that they fought in the war, they were defeated, and couldn't find jobs after that, without any financial means for life that led them to alcohol, gambling, and drugs. Many of them were diagnosed with PTSDs and haven't had chance to work on healing their traumas. She thinks that the war did it, but it was one more problem for women who felt responsible for families and didn't feel embarrassed to beg for their families if they had to. Women took more initiatives. They were searching for help and showed interest in finding solutions. And as she recalled, they would go 10 times to knock at the doors of some donors to get a cow or something else they needed. Danka believes that these women have some kind of gene that has been implanted, ingrained into them through family raising, and they simply think they have to do that, to take care about their families. Danka helped them and encouraged them to keep providing for their families, rebuilding their homes and relationships with their neighbors, and to have their voices visible. Although she was raised in the culture that didn't encourage women to speak for themselves, but mostly to follow husbands and to be wise, which means manipulative, if she wanted to achieve or get something more than they were assigned. Over time, she understood how important it was for women to get voice, to highlight their achievements, and to promote them in public. Invisible and silenced, women were raised in traditional families with gender hierarchy. Man is always in the first place. And she recalled in the memory one of the saying, silence of a man is better than a talk of a woman. Familiar? Saying that resonated through her youth. She heard these messages, but she acknowledged that the rules are not applicable now in the new social context. Men and women are equal, and I would give more advantage to women over men, she said. She knows that they are more responsible, and they, when they resolve problems and try always to find the peaceful solution. Discovering one's voice as a process. And Danka tried to teach them, once they developed voice, that they shouldn't remain silent. In addition, women shouldn't make men to support their mothers. They should make men to support their mothers, sisters, and wives, and to honor them for their accomplishments. She showed frustration with men's behavior who claimed their rights based on their sex, which couldn't be tolerated and accepted anymore. She received similar lessons from her mother, who was saying to her, "You will not reach far forward with this kind of attitude. A man should be respected." Danka, however, accomplished so much with her feminist thoughts and actions. She's aware that concept of feminism is abused and used incorrectly in our social context, and that it still carries negative connotation. But it seems that she gladly encourages others to join her and bring their own perspectives. She is not hesitant to declare that she is a feminist empower. although for many women it's not desirable identity today. That feminism can be seen through all my work. However, many women find that, but that they don't flaunt that identity in public. Essentially, I think that the job I have done with refugees and helping them to take care about families was through feminism. She, like many other women in Bosnia, promotes her own vision. Feminism from individual perspective that governs each life in specific ways. Her way was her power to listen, to help, to gather people, and to reconcile them. And as she explains, to bring back neighbor to neighbor. And she really did it. She brought back neighbors to neighbors. Another important remark she noticed was about acknowledgement of the work women and men do. She said women's work is mostly not recognized enough, not visible, and is considered less relevant in predominant patriarchal culture. Men are always seeking acknowledgement for acknowledgement. They receive much praise for something and they make a point of flaunting that afterwards. This type of praise bothers me a little. I noticed that in my work, the fact that they love to flaunt and they talk about it for years. I forget it and I don't remember all that I have done, but they know how to frame the prize they receive and they know how to present it where it needs to be presented. Women do something, but as Danka notices, they keep quiet about it, and it is assumed that this is something they should do and move on. Women move on and they are looking for new problems to solve and to help, while men solve a tiny little problem and somehow they know how to get respect of the community for that. As for women, there is no fanfare. And it is kind of understood that this is how it should be, that this was passed on women from generations to generations. Danka wants to change that and encourage women to talk about their achievements. And also, she wants them to share information about their successes. But as she admitted, it is hard to change the culture and perception of socially acceptable behaviors and roles. So this is part of the story of one of the women. And you could have seen basically her perception of the Bosnian woman. So how she found them. And she also showed a little bit from her own family background and upbringing, basically what kind of messages and what kind of family settings basically we had, and what kind of messages women had. But that dedication to family and to help, to support, to find peaceful solution, to reconcile was crucial. And that's why, I mean, she recognized in these women and in these initiatives genuine local feminist activities. So for her, this is feminism. And she wants every woman to find her own way. So I would like to stop now and to give you a chance to discuss some of these issues and to pose some questions. And it is, yeah.
Actually, I have a lot of questions.
Oh, good.
So I guess I'm going to try to go logically back to the beginning of your talk. The first was, I know, especially in the context of Bosnia, but I mean, it's a trend that we see worldwide with women, but especially in the context of Bosnia, it's very difficult to even get people to open up about anything. They don't feel like they have anything worth saying. And when they do have something to say, well, everyone else has gone through this. Well, everyone else has all of this. I don't have, who wants to listen to me? You know?
I don't have story.
Yes, I don't have a story. Who wants to listen to me? Or even, they do have a story. They want people to listen to them, but they don't know. They feel like they will be criticized for it. How do you think that these women, especially, how did they get over the fear, especially, of being criticized? Like, for example, if I want to, so many times I want to speak to people here, and they're afraid of being criticized by their own community, not by other people, but by their own community for speaking out. By their own community, by other women, they're afraid of speaking out, and they're afraid of being like, I don't know how to say it in English, I'm a lojavan, and like their accomplishments and their past is not worth anything to anyone.
So you didn't find any answers so far?
I haven't. How did you find it? How were you able to help them overcome that? And what answers did you find for that?
Okay, I'm going to tell you, but I would like to hear from male colleagues what they think. Why is that? Why women, but also men, because I also met, I work with men, I also met a lot of men. They are afraid of and they're scared. They don't want to be criticized. They don't want to step aside of socially acceptable roles and behaviors. So it is, always fear that you're going to say or do something which will not be acceptable in the community. But we have to remember what prophets in the history, Prophet Muhammad and others, what they have done, the community didn't like it. Community, when they come to the stage of development, to be self-satisfied, they don't want to change it because they don't want to be moved from their comfort zones. And everything what you bring new, it's hard for them to accept. At least, from my experience for women, it is hard because somebody else is showing you that is possible, that there is a way, and you are not able to do that. And then it's easier to say, look at her, Alma. She is trying to be clever and brighter than she is. Who is she? She's trying to lead something and to be everywhere, to be on TV, to say. It's easier to criticize than to do something. That's why, what I learned from these women, but also learned from my own experience, that it's important, first of all, to talk to yourself and to say, okay, what are you going to achieve? So what is important? Where you are heading? So what is your goal? What are your motives? And if you are clear with that, as believer, for those who are believers, you say, okay, in my faith and with my God, in my understanding, if I'm able to reconcile that and being okay with that and say, okay, I'm doing something important for the community, not only for today, but I'm doing something important for justice. Because what Islam is about if it's not about justice? And where is justice? And and these women did the same, basically. They had hardships during the first years. They were criticized as Danka from her family, by their families, by their friends, communities. Everybody told her and some other women, like my colleague and also theologian who is managing now one of the biggest women's organizations in Bosnia with over 30 employees there. When she, who was expelled by Catholic Croats in Srednja Bosnia, in central Bosnia, to Zenica, and when she started working with women and children and accepted all, there was no limitation, who could come to that center. Everybody who was in need. And some people were saying to her, Catholic Croats expelled you from your home. They destroyed everything. So now, how can you do that? And she said, as believer, I know that these people who are also refugees and victims, who are also expelled from somewhere, deserve to be treated with justice. So I cannot treat these people because somebody else did it to me. And she did it, and basically is so successful in her work that she was the first one in Bosnia and Herzegovina who was able to get state support for her work, to get 12 municipalities who are governed both by Croatians, because in Bosnian constitutional and legal framework we have municipalities and provinces governed by different ethnic groups, so it depends where you live. So she was able to convince all of these mayors to sign the protocol and to provide finance for shelters and then for women and children and to support their center. But she said, as hijabi woman, it was not easy for her to travel to these cities. When you appear in municipalities where they couldn't imagine in dreams that somebody like her would appear there. She appeared. And she said, I want to test it myself, but also them. And I want to give them an opportunity to say, and then also to reject the proposal. But if they would reject, I would knew that I have done everything what I could. And I can come one day before my God and say, God, I have done this. And it was not up to me anymore. So, if you are really clear with yourself, what are your motivations? What do you want to do? What is your goal? It's easy. But, many of us need support, need encouragement, need somebody to tell you, you are good in that, you can do that. It doesn't matter what your neighbor or somebody is saying, it's okay, and one day they will recognize that work. They were also saying to me, right after the war, I started traveling with multi-religious center in Sarajevo, traveling to many villages and cities doing interreligious dialogue. And they were saying, how could you go there because you know what kind of crimes they committed there? And I said, I know, but we have to live together again. And why are you going there first? It is important who is doing first step. And peacemaking, it doesn't matter who is doing first step. It's important to come to peace. And then, when you come to some places for the first time, people cannot believe that you are there. Then you talk to them. Then you go second time and third time, and then you become friends. Then you get those people around some issues that are important, and you got them on your sides, and you got them at least to start and open themselves and start telling their stories, because we know in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Bosnian Muslims are the biggest victims, but also other people suffered, and they are also victims in some parts of Bosnia. And today, basically, I can say, after all, most people in Bosnia are losers, but basically all of us lost, because we don't have a functional state. We don't have, the economic and political system that can provide the minimum for decent life. So, it's important to have clear vision of what we want to do, and also it's important to encourage other people. And you can encourage them if you work with them. And the best way is to go among people. That's why Franciscans, for instance, I don't know how much you're familiar with that, why they were successful in the Balkans. Why Catholic Church sent Franciscans there? Because their way of missionary work was to go among people and to live with people. So you need to go there and to talk to them. You cannot judge me if you haven't had a chance to talk to me. You can say you can have biases, prejudices, and everything else, but if you haven't had a chance to talk to me, to see what are my goals, what are my wishes, emotions, dilemmas, etc., then you can say, oh my God, this microcosmos is so complex. It's not so easy, this crazy lady doing this or that. In the end, it's not our prerogative to judge people. It is God's prerogative. What we can do is to give nice advice, to talk basically what Prophet Muhammad told us. If you act as a believer, but also non-believers have ethical and moral values. They can also be moral persons, and I know many of them who do not observe any religion and who say they don't believe in God. They might believe that in something, but not necessarily in God, but they are quite moral persons. And they are good people who are doing good for their communities. Yes?
I recently read a book by Ibu Patel, who is a founder of the Interfaith Youth Corps. The title of the book is Sacred Ground, and his approach, the approach that seek to work for them was that they went to college campuses. And I'm not sure if in Bosnia and Herzegovina there's an opportunity to do that or not, because the campuses may also be segregated.
Yeah, they are mostly.
So, so their approach was to go to campuses and talk to young people. Most of the time, the older people are set in their in their frames of mind, and they have their own things that they are working on. But the youth are open to ideas, are open to new approaches, and are open to doing things differently than their parents. So, so they went to campuses and they got them involved in social work, people from different religions and incidentally ethnicities, but the focus was on religion. And through working together, they developed love, and they developed understanding of people of other faiths. Usually if you talk to people of religion, they may mostly talk about that particular religion, and may even encourage segregation from other religions, and compare their own religion to the others, and create a feeling of superiority. So their approach of working with young people and having them work together and develop respect for each other seemed to change attitudes from surveys and so forth.
Yes.
And perhaps this can work in terms of attitudes towards women also. And a parallel to attitudes towards women was a situation in Bangladesh, where Muhammad Yunus started microloans, and the people who mostly got microloans were women. They preferentially gave them to women, and women started sewing machine operations and so forth, and made some money. And they met some very stiff resistance from men. They did not like women becoming financially independent or significant financial contributors.
They're gonna be bossy, huh?
Yeah. So the people who were giving microloans had to do two things. One was to give loans to women and encourage them to work, and the other was to try to provide counseling to men, to tell them that listen, you still have your place, and your wife or your daughter or whoever that might be is contributing to the family income. So why don't you look at them as allies rather than as a enemy or as a rival? So I can understand the situation of women who are not only trying to build things in the community, but also facing resistance, and I don't know who would provide that counseling, but
Yeah, but
there is a need for
these
counseling.
women were trying also to do that, and there are still ongoing projects, economic empowerment, but also projects, reconciliations through servings, mutual activities, either interreligious or simply encountering of people for various events, and then doing something good for the community, building something together, which will bring them closer to each other. So these women do that, and they also mentioned this when they, for the first time, came to some villages and offered these small loans to start small businesses for women. You know, they said, women welcomed us, made a coffee, talked to us, and when it comes to decision whether to start business and who is going to take money and sign papers, then men piped in. So they basically made decisions, as this lady said, you know. They only made decisions, but everything else is done by women. So yeah, they had many challenges at the beginning, but they were able also to educate many of these women, to bring them to trainings, seminars, and also to travel, because for some women in villages it was inconceivable to travel somewhere without their husbands. It was unacceptable socially, simply, you know. And she's going to some seminar, you know, to learn how to be a good businesswoman. And there were resistance from their husbands, but they accepted it in the end because they have seen that everything what they have been doing, it was for the family. They haven't done it to bring it somewhere else or to, you know, to promote themselves, but to support their families, their children, to provide for their schools, because many children in villages were not able to go to schools because they haven't had enough basic means to pay the bus tickets to go to the city, etc. Yeah, so they are doing so many projects, but still, I mean, when there is no enough people in the local community who will join them. And one of them said, you know, the biggest fear when you are thinking about this issue was not only not to be accepted, but also that you will not have allies. You know, you start something and then you'll see, okay, the room is empty. There are only a few people behind me. So this is, yeah, and it happened to them many times, you know, when they advocated from trafficking in human beings, violence, and etc. So they organize many actions, and when you go to the streets, I mean, there are dozens of women and men, and it's not, and most of people who are not affected directly, and it is somehow human, how human consciousness works. You know, if I'm not personally affected with a particular problem, I will not react. But for believers, I mean, you have to react to injustice. It doesn't matter is it going against you or no. Because when it comes in front of you, otherwise it is late. So many people are not ready, I mean, to take the risk to be responsible citizens. And that's why it is hard, I mean, to get wider community around these issues and ideas and then to get support.
I mean, a question for you. You mentioned that a lot of these women lack visibility, especially in the national and international levels. What have you found? I mean, what techniques, what ways have they been able, for those that have been successful, especially, I mean, there are in Sarajevo, especially, with associations of women that are, I mean, however much, but marginally successful. What techniques have they used? And then the other thing that I'm thinking about throughout this entire thing is that in Bosnia, I feel, and culturally, there's an aversion to something that's organized. There's an aversion to something that a university or an NGO, yes. There's, you know, for an event, there's an aversion to a multicultural event or something. They say, what are you selling me? What kind of, you know, this is a story that's being sold to me. How do we get past those templates of, you know, this is not an organization, these are people. This is not, okay, it's an organization, we have an organizational structure. Yes, we have to work within some kind of a structure, but these are people, and we're just community members, and we're just here to help our own communities in some way.
Yeah, there is a huge gap, and we still need to learn how to be citizens, how to be accountable human beings. Basically, there is a huge gap because before, a century ago, or at least 60, 70 years ago, congregations, mosques and churches had that function to gather people, to organize people, to be responsible for social life, social activities, etc. And then we had that period of socialism. When state institutions took over responsibilities on some issues, but we haven't been any more individuals, who were struggling and striving to do something as individuals. But we were part of the collective, group of people who have had, the party at the top, everything was subjugated to its goal, and the community, they haven't had an opportunity and also need to struggle alone, because the state basically provided it for you. So after 1990s, when we organized first NGOs, first associations, we started learning how to do that. This is beginning. I mean, here in the United States, you have, tradition of associations, organized work, etc. And also here, churches and religious communities are involved in that work, and they combined it. We still there need to learn that. This is a process for us. So for instance, to convince an imam there to say, okay, you as an imam or priest need to be on the street when, workers or unions, trade unions have gatherings or demonstrations because they didn't receive salaries for the last, 20 months. You have to be there because you as religious leaders have to show responsibility, but they don't do that. So what kind of religion or faith we are talking about? So it's not only enough going to mosque and church and pray. That is duty towards God, but it is your duty towards people. So there is no that sense of civic responsibility for others somehow was interrupted. So as I said, what was nurtured within a religious life and communities before disappeared, and now we are learning to do that again. And also you have to understand Bosnian peoples, because many foreigners came to Bosnia offering something, and people became reluctant, saying, who are you now? So what are you selling to me? So they are fed up with all of these ideas and everything that's going on around, and they became cautious, because when you have the war and when everything was erupted and you don't have borders and the system that functions, then you have so many ideas, people, interests, influences, and people became very cautious about that because they had bad experiences there. We had very bad experiences during the war and after the war.
Assalamu alaikum. In the beginning of your talk, and maybe throughout, it sounded, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, but the work that these have done, it's a two-part question, so this is the first part. Are you advocating that it should be more well-known and publicized for them to have, yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, this is one.
Yeah. How many of the 12 women who you interviewed, regardless of their religious affiliation, said that, this is for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I'm doing this because this is the right thing to do, and I don't care, the izzah is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I'm doing this and I don't care.
Most of them.
Most of them.
Most of them. Only 3 of them stated clearly, we are doing that out of our deep faith in God, because God is asking that from me, or I'm obliged to do that, or I've learned that in my religion. The rest of them, although they are believers, most of them are 2 agnostics, 10 of them are believers. They believe in God and they observe religion, not on a regular basis, but they observe religion from time to time, were not motivated by religion. And in general, my thesis in this book is that peace building in post-war Bosnia was not motivated by religion. And religion was not conversation starter. Why? Because religion was so much misused during the war, politicized. Ethno-nationalist elites used religion for their political goals. And it is bad when you have misused religion in daily politics. You know, you can hear really everything. And then religion, as I said at the beginning, became, instead of God, you got another deity. You got your nation or ethnicity, and it was not, it was a joke, but some people genuinely believed in that. That Jesus, for instance, was a Croatian. Imagine that. He was not, and telling people that he was a Jew, it was unimaginable. He was Christian. Of course, he was not Christian, he was a Jew. And then similar things. So religion was really politicized to such extent. And then some religious leaders legitimized or blessed war crimes. And they were deeply involved in blessing war crimes. Then religious communities also found the war pretty much good ground to get some of power in public sphere, because they haven't had any during the socialism. So it was the way to become a player in public sphere. So they were preoccupied with restitution of their property, with religious education in public schools, etc. So they haven't had time to deal with these issues, and they were not ready to join people when they have been invited. So and then they sent that message. And only in 1997, when World Churches of Councils here in the United States and in Europe made our religious leadership to establish interreligious council, they did it. But only to appear during Bayram Eid or Christmas or any other holidays to shake hands, to send best wishes, and that's it. So it was hard to bring them together to convey message to people. And before 2001, there were no faith-based initiatives in peace. So mostly secular human rights organizations, both women's and in general secular organizations did that, and they initiated these activities. And what was good, they provided space and room for religious perspective. For instance, I was able to work on peace initiatives within secular organizations, but bringing religion on the table. Because they thought, oh, if it is helpful, if it can help, why not? But it shouldn't be the key principle. It can be one of the arguments in the discussion. Not the key one, not the most important one, but one of the arguments, which was okay, because they initiated all the job there. And it was fair from them to provide that space, because religious communities, even today, don't have space for that, unfortunately. Only Catholic Church, a little bit, is more open towards that. Islamic community, I think last year they established the first commission, they call it Commission for Interreligious Dialogue. It is 2012. And in that commission is one person doing nothing so far. So basically what you can expect from, but I don't think that organized religious communities are the only one in charge for that. I think we as believers are in charge for that. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter is it, do you work in your religious community or in secular NGO or as an individual? So it's up to you. It is your responsibility to find a way. If your religious community doesn't recognize at that very moment that is not relevant, so you need to find a way to do that. And some of these women, after 2001, started to bring religion into conversation, started organizing religious activities, education, and today one of them from Sarajevo She has started 2 years ago education for teachers of religious studies in schools, or of Islamic religious education. And so far, she had over 900 of them who passed these trainings and seminars, basically to help them to deliver these lessons better than they are doing it so far, because they are missing some perspectives. Because as theologians, you are trained in one way, and the whole world is out there, and so you are not aware of that. So somehow we are still not able to make connections. And we are producing new teachers, new scholars, new theologians, I don't know, like they are going to live somewhere in the atmosphere, and real context with real challenges and with real people. So these are still problems we need to figure out how to do that. But some of these women decided, are out of their faith to do this. And this particular one was raised in typical communist family in Sarajevo. She said, I haven't had any knowledge about Islam except baklava and celebrating Eid. That's it. Okay, and we had names. Yeah, it was minimum. And we said we were Muslims. But when the war started, basically most people had to learn what they were. So she discovered Islam through some Arabs who came to Bosnia. And she became a Wahhabi, Salafi Muslim. And when I met her for the first time, she was involved in some peace activities, but not so much. Later on, she became more involved, and she admitted that she was not completely free there with that community to do this peace work, because they limited her, telling her that she couldn't work with other religious groups, and she left basically the movement and the mosque where she was working, but she of course didn't leave Islam, so she was still observing Muslim, and she said, at least what I got from these people is a discipline to pray 5 times a day, to fast, and I mean some things useful, but basically as a highly educated person, she couldn't imagine to stay in the environment where uneducated people are trying to explain religion in such a weird way, and then try to keep them under control just because they have money. So yeah, she left the movement, and she's today very much active in peace, and then the Islamic community granted her authorization to work with teachers, because she's very persistent. Once Grand Mufti refused to give it to her, she went again. As Danka explained, they keep knocking at the doors, 10 times. If you say no, I'll come again. So this is something, you really need to appreciate it. And this is something that has to be known, that has to be published. And teach people, these are paradigms, these are models of humanity, of faith, of courage, that needs to be promoted, because today the media, prevailing media discourse is, filled with either bad music or soap operas. There are people from Turkey, yeah. Sultan Süleyman is the most popular figure today in the entire Balkans, so everybody's watching that soap opera, and it doesn't matter whether they are Muslims or non-Muslims. So for the Christmas, one of the Franciscan priests told me, I called my sister and told her I was coming to visit you for Christmas, and she said, don't come at 4, so But then, for the Sunday Mass, I was talking to people. It was early morning, 7 o'clock, so everybody was sleepy, and they didn't listen what I was saying. And then, I used the momentum and said, okay, but you remember, in that soap opera, Sultan Süleyman, and everybody raised their heads and started listening. So, yeah, most media these about that. So young people want to be either singers or actors and actresses and become rich overnight. And so we don't have positive stories that have to nurture these kind of values and virtues in people.
I do have one more that I got. This is I mean kind of related, but it's actually a tangent off of your talk. So I mean it's wonderful, of course, that our women are doing this work, these NGOs, and this is a process of healing. This is how the nation will heal itself. And I think actually you mentioned that in some sense women have had the advantage in all of this. There are disadvantages in not being recognized, but in that sense, on a personal level, I feel like women have an advantage because they're learning more than their male counterparts to be open. They're learning more, they're enriching their souls more. They're doing more enrichment for their own work, for their own mentality, intellectual prosperity, where I feel like men are lagging behind in that. Now, the problem with this is that it might come to a point where women are seen as only agents of peace, and they might become typecast where they can only work in NGOs, they can only work in these small grassroots organizations. How do we keep that from happening? Because we need women also to move into a much more public and stronger political sphere, where they're not just restricted to let me work in a religious organization, let me work as a CEO of an NGO. That's great. I can head an NGO, but an NGO can only go so far. I need to get a female president. I need to be able to get a female minister of finance, minister of education, minister. How do we move women into
They
that?
do that too because they consider political participation of women and political and economic empowerment as a part of their peace work.
Okay.
So this lady I mentioned, Danka, deserved all merits in her organization that they got first female mayor in the city.
Oh.
Yeah, and these women are also working so much to bring more women on decision-making positions because if you have only men to make laws, they will tailor those laws according to their own perceptions and needs. You have to have also women there, but also it's not only to say, okay, we have to have more women there. We need to change the entire structure. I mean, women are not super women who can do everything. I mean, who can be good mothers, wives, housewives, do all the job, and then being successful in career and politics. I mean, they're not magicians. They're only human beings. So if they want to be that, then they have to have partners in their marriages, not husbands, authoritarian husbands who will, expect their wives to do everything. They will have to be partners and share responsibilities about children and about household. But most men, you are here, you have to admit, are reluctant about that because most men, especially in Bosnia, we are raised in that men, women basically raise these men not to do that work. And they prefer to have somebody to take care about this stuff for them. Am I right? Yeah, of course. So it is better to have a wife who will do all of these things around you and you can pretend that you are a leader in your community. You have time to do that. Women simply don't have time for that so far because they do all the work. Yeah, so it is hard. So these women have been trying to encourage women to run for decision-making positions, but it is hard life for many of them. And then they have to make decisions. What is their preference, or what they want to do, family or career? So they have to choose. Yeah. So and if you are living in a poor country like Bosnia, so it is even harder everywhere, but especially there. So yeah, they consider that part also as peace work, and they keep working. But for women and villages, economic empowerment is crucial. So and then they do lots of education, lots of small fundings, small businesses to encourage them to raise some money for their families. Again, everything is about families, you know, to keep family going on and together. Because many families split it during the war. The war brought so many negative consequences, but also impacted the lives of people. Imagine in these villages, I mean, we should have understanding for men who were on the fronts, who suffered from PTSD, but it is not the way, you know, to take refuge in gambling, alcohol, and drugs. So this is not the way, because you have responsibilities for your family. So yeah, they do that, but they are still outside of the mainstream of the politics.
Actually, too, because the foundations aren't set yet, so they can't move out of their families,
Yeah.
even though they need to. So it just goes back and forth. Back
Chicken and egg. Yeah.
I think it takes a generation to
Yeah, I
change
think
things
so.
around. If the women or if the community can start working to a new concept of shared responsibility in the family, and in the beginning it would be hard. You know, the mother would not only have to do the work but also raise the boys, understanding that they have a share in the household. So when they grow up to be men, they will grow up with different ideas or different perspectives.
Exactly. Yes.
And
But they are, honestly, men are very reluctant about that. When I say, sometimes I speak in mass, my brother is an imam, and sometimes when I go to his mass and speak to men and women, talk about these issues, and mention, okay, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam cooked for himself. He did all our household work, so he didn't ask anybody to bring him food or water. If he could have done it, he could have anything he wanted, but he didn't want. And yet, I mean, these kind of examples, I mean, we don't want to follow these kind of examples. We simply skip that. It's not relevant. Because in patriarchal cultures, I mean, we simply nurture different kind of hierarchical relations where I believe both women and men are not happy. When you have hierarchy and when you don't have true partnership, nobody's happy. Because I've been looking many couples, I've worked with them. Men are heads of families and they try to keep control over everything or over woman until she's, I don't know, 45, something like that. And then it's her time to take the control. And you have, only, struggle who is going to be on power, which is really bad. And they are competing, when my time has come. Now I'm going to show you what you have done to me. So which is really, really sad that we raise generations with that and not to teach them about true partnerships. I mean, that all of us will be happier if we can share, if we really can, be partners in everything. And we can make agreement, okay, if it's better that I don't work and raise children, and if I decide about it, it is okay, but we cannot impose it as a model of life for everybody. So this is not something good because, and many marriages today, we have so high rate of divorce. Many marriages are split up and do not work, so that's not good. Because everybody want to have power. So everybody thinks he or she deserves to be in power. Everything is about that. And we don't want to learn basically to share and to give.
Because that's our heart.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard.
It takes a lot of
Yeah, exactly. And then wrong motives.
And we take what we like from Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's life, and we leave what we don't like.
Yeah,
So
we are very selective, like
Yeah, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam made and was part of an agreement called Hilful Fudul, that people came together. This is before Islam. Just on the concept of social service, to help the needy, to help people who needed help, and he said after becoming prophet that if I had to do it all over again, I would do it all over again, cooperating with non-believers in social service. So
Yeah, but as I said, it takes time. For instance, what Vox and these religious organizations did before. For instance, in Sarajevo, we had so many Vox, and then they had public soap kitchens and then everything else. So today, I mean, it took some time for Muslims, to say, okay, we need to do that again. Okay, Ghazi Mustafa is not there, and some other people who entrusted money for that, but we need to do that. It took some time. As I said, we have interrupted huge gap between some periods, and we lost some of the traditions, and we need to learn again how to do that. Hey, young boys, you are silent. I cannot imagine, because you're going to be married one day. So how are you going to...
Everything is going okay. We don't have questions. Everything is being understood.
What? Where is there? Yeah, this is a training session. We need to be open to learn every day. We always can learn from somebody.
Now let us do a perfect husband-to-be training session.
But I mean, today also women need, both of them, believe me, I mean, so these new generations, both of them need good training, because marriage is not something, granted as something, for a couple of days. This is serious business, that somebody needs to be prepared for that, and then for these kind of relationships, nobody is teaching you how to do that, because you are expected to know somehow. And again, I mean, only Catholic Church have counseling for young people before they get married, to go through, I think, 3 or 6 months education. Yeah. Imagine, and be someplace, keep that and say, okay, it's important that I like her or like him, and that's it. Go to have wedding, give blessings and get blessings, and then that's okay. And in a year or two, get divorced. So which is not responsible. And both women and men need to learn more about that.
Bosnia is such a small population, though.
Yeah, it
it's
is.
necessary to basically have everyone civically activated.
Exactly.
It's necessary to go out to the very last village and pull as many people in as possible to do as many different to fulfill their competencies, everything. Because there is such a small population, you can't anymore. Every single person is so valuable. Every single person. I mean, the people who are running our TV stations need to change their programming. Our imams and our priests and everything, we need to change their lectures and their sermons. We need to have our NGOs be retrained to think in a different way, to think in a service-oriented way.
This is called building a new society.
That's why we have young people like you, like Mirza and others, who are help with that. Because the post-socialist mindset, especially in education, higher education is problematic, as just to deliver knowledge and not to think about skills and how to use that knowledge, how to apply it in real life. So Mirza mentioned his example from Tuzla. So people are, we still haven't changed higher education to be skill-oriented and to be market-oriented, to follow the needs in the society. So we have just, thousands and thousands of people are graduating and do not have a clue what they're gonna do, and they have so many diplomas and they are not able to do anything. So that's also something, you know, that needs to be changed, but it will take some time for that. Yeah, there is so much things to be done. Few people who are really
willing to go through the struggle too. The other problem is we have so many people in the diaspora. We have more Bosnians in the diaspora born after that have stayed and that are educating themselves, and that could go and they could change something within Bosnia and Herzegovina. But why would you leave comfort and education?
Comfort zone is okay, so I don't want to go outside of that comfort zone. That's why people do not react unless they are directly affected. Yeah, so which is not only in Bosnia.
I think the problem is that you see everything as a problem, not as opportunity.
Yeah.
You're saying those things as a problem, you're just complaining. So thinking, yeah, diaspora, let's find solutions how to do it as opportunity.
Exactly.
So.
Yeah, but the thing is with diaspora too, we can't also realistically, I was just thinking about this, we do expect a lot from our diaspora. And I know in Bosnia, I hear a lot of complaints, why isn't the diaspora doing anything to help? Well, we have communities with 6,000, 10,000, 60,000 in St. Louis, Bosnians. You can't uproot 60,000 people and bring them back. So the diaspora has to work for also settling their own diasporic communities here. So for the youth that are, or not just the youth, the people that
you need also here.
So we need efforts here. We need the efforts there.
Exactly. You cannot anymore import imams from Bosnia and from other countries. You need imams